I watched the clock as it hit midnight, the soft chimes echoing through the empty halls of our house. The silence felt overwhelming, a sharp contrast to the turmoil bubbling underneath everything. The dinner I had made hours ago sat untouched on the table, cold and serving as a symbol of the growing distance between us. Just as I was about to call it a night and head to bed, I saw headlights slicing through the darkness outside, signaling Erin's arrival. She floated into the house, wearing a radiant smile. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes sparkled in a way I hadn't seen in years. In her hand was a bouquet of lilies, her favorite, but they weren't from me. Erin paused before taking a sip of the whiskey, her eyes locked onto mine. The confident, carefree act she had put on moments earlier started to falter. I could almost see her mind racing, trying to find a way out of the tangled mess she was in. "So, what's this really about, Alex?" she finally asked, her voice carrying a mix of annoyance and false innocence. "You're acting like you've uncovered some big secret, but honestly, you're blowing things out of proportion." I leaned in, resting my elbows on the table, and met her gaze head-on. "Overreacting? Maybe. But why don't you enlighten me, Erin? Tell me why you've been working so late. Explain who gave you those flowers and why you suddenly smell like cologne that isn't mine." She stiffened, and I saw a flicker of anger cross her face. "You're being paranoid. I've told you again and again, work has been demanding. The flowers? They're from a client, appreciating my efforts. And the cologne? Maybe I just felt like trying something new." "Trying something new?" I repeated, letting the words sink between us. "That's strange. You've never been one to change things without a reason. And since when do clients send you lilies? You always said it was too personal, crossing a line." Her eyes shifted away, focusing on the untouched meal in front of us. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. I could tell she was scrambling to come up with something believable. "I don't know what you want me to say, Alex," she muttered, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "You're making something out of nothing. I'm tired, stressed, and yeah, maybe I haven't been the best wife lately, but that doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong." I watched her closely, noticing the slight tremor in her hands as she took another sip of whiskey. She was playing the victim, trying to make me feel guilty for doubting her, but I wasn't falling for it this time. "All right," I said, leaning back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Let's say I believe you. Let's say you've just been exhausted and stressed. What about the fact that you've been acting like someone else lately? The constant texting, the secret phone calls, the sudden interest in your appearance. Things just don't add up, Erin." She opened her mouth to respond, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No more lies, no more excuses. I know something's going on, and I'm giving you one chance to tell the truth. If you don't, I swear you'll regret it." Her eyes widened slightly at the threat, and for a brief moment, I saw fear flicker across her face. But then she quickly masked it with defiance, setting her glass down with a sharp clink. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped, her voice rising. "I don't know what you expect from me, Alex. You've created this entire scenario in your head, and now you're hunting for proof that isn't there. I'm not the villain in your paranoid story." I stared at her, my jaw clenched, doing my best to keep my emotions in check. This wasn't how I had imagined things playing out. Deep down, I had hoped she would just come clean and we could face the truth together, but Erin was digging in her heels, determined to cling to her lies. "So, is that your final answer?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "Because if it is, then we're done talking." She looked at me, narrowing her eyes. "What do you mean, over?" I stood up, towering over her as she stayed seated, her confidence beginning to crumble. "I mean, you've made your decision, Erin, and now I'm making mine." Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. As I headed towards the front door, I could hear her calling after me, her voice shaky and unsure, but I didn't turn around. It was time for Erin to realize that her actions had real consequences, and the game she thought she was playing was about to take an unexpected twist. "Where are the kids?" she asked, glancing around the eerily quiet living room, her voice tinged with confusion. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, letting the silence stretch before finally answering. They're staying at my mom's tonight. Figured it'd be good for us to have some time alone. Her smile wavered for a brief moment, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she quickly covered it with a casual laugh. Well, that's a surprise. You should have told me. I would have come home earlier. Would you? I asked, locking eyes with her, searching for any trace of guilt or regret. The lingering scent of expensive cologne, one that wasn't mine, hung in the air between us, silently telling the stories she refused to say out loud. She hesitated, the crack in her facade barely visible. Of course, you know how crazy work's been lately. I nodded slowly, letting the unspoken truths settle between us. Must be some job that comes with flowers and a new scent. Her eyes widened for just a second, vulnerability flickering across her face, but she quickly shut it down, rolling her eyes dismissively. Don't start, Alex. You're being ridiculous. I leaned back in my chair, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Am I? Coming home at midnight smelling like someone else, with gifts I didn't give you. Tell me, Erin, which client is treating you so well these days? She opened her mouth to fire back, but no words came out. The silence between us was louder than any excuse she could have come up with. The room seemed to close in, the weight of broken trust making the truth unavoidable. As she stood there, fumbling for lies to patch up the unraveling pieces of our marriage, I felt an odd calm wash over me. The truth was no longer buried, and the real game had officially begun. Sit down, I said quietly, motioning toward the chair across from me. We need to talk. Her eyes darted toward the door, clearly contemplating an escape, but eventually, she sat down, chin raised in defiance. I poured her a glass of whiskey, sliding it across the table. To honesty, I said, raising my own glass. She stared at me, uncertainty clouding her expression as she reluctantly clinked her glass against mine. The sound echoed ominously in the room, signaling the start of a conversation that would change everything. What she didn't realize was that this late-night confrontation and the absence of the kids were just the beginning. I had plans, carefully thought-out plans, to take back the respect and peace that her betrayal had stripped away from me. And this was just the first move in a game she hadn't even realized she was playing. I left the kitchen, letting her sit there with her confusion. I could hear her quick, hesitant footsteps trailing behind me. Alex, where are you going? She called after me, her voice betraying the fear she was trying so hard to mask. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into the living room, where everything was already set. I grabbed my phone off the coffee table and, without saying a word, started scrolling through the photos. Her eyes widened as she caught on to what I was looking at. You went through my phone? She hissed, her voice low, almost threatening. I finally looked up at her, feeling a cold satisfaction as the color drained from her face. You left it unlocked one night, I replied evenly. I wasn't even searching for anything. But then I saw his name. And the pictures, they told me all I needed to know. She stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing, struggling to find the words, but nothing came out. I continued swiping through the photos, each one another painful reminder of her betrayal. There were selfies, candid shots of them laughing together, and intimate messages she probably thought I'd never see. Let me explain, she whispered, but there was no strength in her voice. Explain? I shot back, my voice rising with each word. Explain how you lied to me for months? How you made a fool of me, our kids, and everything we built together? She took a step toward me, her eyes pleading, but I held up my phone, showing her one final picture, her and the other man, kissing, in a place that felt all too familiar. A hotel room. The same one we used to escape to on our anniversaries. Erin's breath caught as she saw the photo, and I watched the panic flood her face. Alex, it's not what it looks like, she stammered. I let out a bitter laugh. Not what it looks like. It looks exactly like what it is, Erin. You were cheating. With some guy who probably doesn't even know half of who you really are. She reached out, but I stepped back, shaking my head. Don't touch me. Her hand fell to her side, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, she looked truly defeated. But I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. You know what the worst part is? I asked, my voice eerily calm. It's not just that you cheated. It's that you thought you could get away with it. That you assumed I wouldn't notice. That you underestimated me. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't interested in hearing any more from her. Pack your things, I said quietly, and leave. Tonight. Before the kids get back in the morning. Her eyes widened in shock. She clearly didn't expect me to make this move so quickly. But I had been planning this ever since I found those messages. Now that the truth was out, I wasn't about to waste any more time. Alex, please, she started, tears welling up in her eyes. We can work this out. We can. No. I cut her off, my voice firm and final. We're done, Erin. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. She stood there, stunned, her tears spilling down her cheeks as she tried to comprehend what was happening. She wasn't used to me being this decisive, this cold. I could see the wheels turning in her head, searching for some way to salvage the situation. Alex, think about the kids, she begged, her voice trembling. We can't just throw everything away. They need us both. We need to talk about this. I stared at her, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. The kids? I echoed, disbelief thick in my voice. You want to talk about the kids now, after everything you've done? You should have thought about them before you decided to tear this family apart. She flinched as if I had physically struck her. Good. She deserved to feel at least a fraction of the pain she had caused me. But even then, she pushed on, her desperation clear. I made a mistake, Alex, a terrible mistake, but we can get through this. I love you. I love our family. Please don't make any rash decisions. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound harsh and bitter as it echoed around the room. Rash decisions? Like the one you made when you decided to sneak around behind my back? No, Erin, this isn't rash. This is me finally seeing you for who you really are. Her face crumpled, and she took a shaky breath, trying to regain her composure. I'll do anything, Alex. Counseling, whatever you want. Just don't end us like this. We've been through so much together. I shook my head, unmoved by her pleas. You ended us the moment you let him into our lives. The moment you lied to me every single day, pretending like everything was fine while playing happy family. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. Please, Alex, I'll change. I'll prove it to you. Just give me one more chance. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered those photos, the lies, the nights I waited while she was off with someone else. The pity vanished, replaced by a steely resolve. You had your chances, Erin, I said, my voice colder than I ever thought possible. And you wasted them. Now pack your things and go. I'm done talking. Erin's face contorted, caught between desperation and disbelief. She wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not by me. Her hand trembled as she reached out, grabbing my arm. Alex, please don't do this. I'm begging you. I looked down at her hand, feeling the weight of her touch, but it only strengthened my resolve. I pulled my arm away, the finality of the gesture making her stumble back. Don't you get it, Erin? There's nothing left to save. You killed whatever was between us the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you. Tears streamed down her face, and for once, she didn't bother wiping them away. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. You and me, we've been through worse. This is the worst, Erin. I snapped, my voice echoing through the house. There's no coming back from this. You chose him over us, over me. And now you've got to live with that choice. She collapsed into the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. It was the first time I'd seen her truly break down. For a brief moment, I felt the pull of old feelings, but then the cold truth of her betrayal crashed over me, and any sympathy I had left evaporated. Please, she whispered through her tears. Please don't do this. I walked over to the front door, grabbing her coat and tossing it onto her lap. "Get out, Erin, before I change my mind and make this even worse for you." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean, worse?" I met her gaze, letting her see just how serious I was. "I haven't even started making you pay for what you did. Don't give me a reason to." Her breath caught in her throat, and for a second, it seemed like she might argue. But something in my face must have convinced her otherwise. Slowly she stood, clutching her coat like it was a lifeline, and headed for the door. As she passed me, she paused, her voice small and broken. "Where am I supposed to go?" I didn't answer. I just opened the door, motioning for her to leave. "That's not my problem anymore." With one last pleading look, she stepped out into the cold night. The wind swirled around her as she walked into the darkness. I closed the door behind her, the sound of the lock clicking into place echoing through the quiet house. For the first time in what felt like forever, a strange peace settled over me, the kind that comes when you finally let go of something that's been weighing you down. Erin was gone, and with her, the lies, the betrayal, and all the pain she had brought into my life. The house was eerily quiet once she left, the only sound being the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. I stood there, letting the silence wrap around me, trying to absorb everything that had just happened. My mind was spinning, but there was an odd calm that seemed to ground me. Then my phone buzzed on the table, shattering the stillness. I glanced down and saw a text notification from the same unknown number that had been messaging Erin. My heart pounded as I unlocked it, half expecting some last-minute plea from her lover. Instead, it was a message meant for Erin. "Miss you already. Tonight was incredible. Can't wait to see you again." My blood turned cold. They had no idea. No clue she was out of the house and completely exposed. The audacity to text her so soon after she left confirmed everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a fling, it was something deeper, more intentional. Without thinking, I typed back, pretending to be her. "Me too. Can we meet again soon?" Seconds later, the reply came, "Tomorrow night. Same place. 8 p.m. I stared at the screen, the plan forming in my mind with a chilling clarity. Erin thought she could fool me, but she had no clue what was coming next. Tomorrow night would be the final act, and I would make sure it was a performance either of them would forget. The following day passed in a blur as I made my preparations. I called in sick to work, let my mom know the kids would be staying with her for another night, and put my plan in motion. Every detail had to be flawless. By the time evening rolled around, I was ready. I knew exactly where they'd be meeting, the same hotel they had used before, the one where Erin and I had shared so many memories. I booked a room next door under a fake name and got there early to set everything up. I felt oddly detached as I placed the small hidden camera in the vent, positioned perfectly to face their room. This wasn't about catching them in the act. I already knew what they were doing. This was about taking control, making sure they understood that they had lost. As 8 p.m. approached, I settled in, turning on the camera feed and watching the minutes crawl by. My heart was pounding, but my mind was razor-sharp, focused. At 8:02, I saw them walk into the room. Erin and her lover, laughing and acting like nothing in the world could touch them, completely unaware that I was watching their every move. I turned up the volume, listening to every disgusting term of affection they exchanged as they crossed the room's threshold. They didn't waste any time. Within moments, they were all over each other, the sweet words turning into breathless whispers and gasps. My fists clenched, the anger simmering just below the surface, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed them to go all the way, to give me exactly what I needed. Then, right as they were fully consumed by their betrayal, I made my move. I pulled out my phone and sent Erin a text, "Enjoying yourself?" On the screen, I watched her reach for her phone. Her face went pale the moment she saw my message. She quickly pulled away from her lover, panic washing over her features. He noticed the shift immediately and asked her what was wrong, but she didn't answer. Instead, she frantically typed back, "Alex, where are you? Please don't do anything crazy." I smiled, savoring the desperation in her words. She knew. She knew she was caught, and there was no escape. I took my time replying, letting her panic. Too late for that, Erin. Come find me. I hit send, watching as she showed the message to her lover, who instantly started dressing, fear and confusion plastered across his face. They had no idea what was coming next. I watched them scramble to put their clothes back on, their frantic movements full of fear. Erin kept glancing at her phone, waiting for another message, but I wasn't going to give her any more warnings. They rushed out of the room, and I waited just long enough for them to believe they were in the clear before I stepped into the hallway. I could hear their hushed voices as they approached the elevator, Erin whispering to her lover, trying to make sense of it all. I followed them, keeping a few steps behind, my heart pounding in my chest. As they stood waiting for the elevator, I finally stepped into view. Erin turned and her eyes widened in horror when she saw me. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" Her lover, a tall, slick-looking guy, glanced between us, quickly piecing together who I was. He opened his mouth to say something, but I silenced him with a cold look. "I'm here to end this," I said, my voice calm despite the storm of emotions inside me. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, and I gestured toward it. "Let's talk some more private, shall we?" Erin hesitated, looking to her lover for reassurance, but he was just as shaken as she was. Finally, she stepped into the elevator, and he followed, with me right behind them. The tension was thick, nearly suffocating, as we descended in total silence. When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, I led them both to the back exit, where my car was parked in a shadowed corner of the lot. Erin's eyes widened in fear, but she knew better than to argue. She understood that this was the end game. "Get in the car," I ordered, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. They obeyed without a word, sliding into the back seat while I took the driver's seat. The silence in the car was stifling as I drove us out of the city, heading to the edge of town where an old, abandoned building stood, a place we used to visit when life was simpler, before everything got so complicated. I parked the car and turned to face them, the dim streetlights casting harsh shadows on their faces. "This is where it ends," I said quietly. "You're going to tell me everything, Erin. Every lie, every secret. And then you'll watch as I tear apart everything you thought you had." She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears, but she didn't argue. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Her lover sat there, pale and silent, realizing too late that he was tangled in a web he couldn't escape from. "Start talking," I demanded, my voice cold and final. Erin swallowed hard, her voice shaking as she began to confess, each word soaked in guilt and regret. "It started months ago," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor of the car. "We met at a work event. He was charming, attentive, and I got swept up in it. I never meant for it to go this far, Alex, I swear." I said nothing, just letting her continue. The pain in my chest tightened with each word, like a vice squeezing my heart, but I needed her to spill everything. She needed to face the full weight of what she'd done. "It was stupid," she whispered, wiping away the tears that kept streaming down her face. "At first, it was just texts, harmless flirting, but then, we started meeting up. I kept telling myself it was just physical, that it didn't mean anything, but—" Her voice broke as she glanced at her lover, who sat stiff and silent beside her. He looked like he wanted to disappear, to be anywhere but caught in the mess they had created. "It was wrong, but I couldn't stop," Erin continued, her voice cracking. "I didn't know how, and I was too scared to tell you, too scared to admit what I'd done." "Scared?" I finally spoke, my voice low and tightly controlled, though I could feel the anger boiling beneath the surface. "You were scared, Erin? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To our family?" She sobbed harder, shaking her head. "I know, Alex. I know I've destroyed everything, but I didn't mean to. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why didn't you stop?" I demanded, leaning closer, my eyes burning into hers. "Why didn't you end it before it went this far? Was he worth more to you than everything we built together?" "No." She shook her head violently. "He wasn't. I don't even know why I did it. I was stupid, selfish. Pathetic. I cut her off, my voice colder than ice. You were pathetic, Erin. And now you expect me to just forgive you? To forget that you tore our lives apart for what? A cheap thrill? Her lover, who had remained silent the whole time, finally spoke up, his voice weak and unsteady. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know. I didn't realize how serious this was. If I had known, I never would have. Shut up! I snapped, my glare shutting him down instantly. You don't get to speak. Not after what you've done. I turned my attention back to Erin, my anger now a slow, controlled burn. You've told me the truth, but that's not enough. You think you can just cry, apologize, and everything will be fine? No. You're going to live with this, Erin. You're going to carry this shame with you every single day, and you're going to face the consequences. She looked up at me, wide-eyed, fear and realization settling in. What are you going to do? I paused, letting the silence linger, letting her imagination run wild with all the possibilities. Then, with a cold smile, I said, You'll see. Erin's eyes searched mine, desperate for a glimpse of mercy. But there was none left to give. Her betrayal had shattered any chance of reconciliation, and all that remained was the harsh, unchangeable truth. I took a deep breath, letting the finality of the moment wash over us. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady, even though emotions churned beneath the surface. You're going to leave, for good. You'll pack your things tonight and be gone by morning. Her breath caught, and she shook her head, trying to protest, but I wasn't done. You're not taking the kids? I continued, my tone leaving no room for argument. I'll be filing for full custody tomorrow. You've proven that you can't put them first, and I won't let them suffer because of your selfishness. Tears streamed down her face as she choked out. Alex, please. They need their mother. They need stability. I cut her off, my voice firm and unyielding. They need a home where they aren't surrounded by lies. You lost the right to call yourself their mother the moment you put your own desires ahead of their well-being. Her lover sat in stunned silence, likely realizing how severe the consequences were going to be for both of them. I turned to him, my expression hardening even further. And as for you, if you ever come near my family again, I'll make sure you regret it. This isn't a threat, it's a promise. He swallowed hard, nodding quickly, eager to distance himself from the mess he'd helped create. I turned back to Erin, softening my tone slightly, though my resolve remained firm. You'll get what you need to start over, but that's it. You're not welcome in our lives anymore. She sobbed, her entire body trembling under the weight of her choices, but I felt no pity. This was the path she had chosen, and now she had to walk it alone. Now go, I said quietly, my voice final. Both of you, before I change my mind and call the police. They didn't hesitate. Erin stumbled out of the car, her lover trailing behind, and I watched as they disappeared into the night. The door to that chapter of my life was closing, and as painful as it was, I knew it was the only way forward. I sat in the car for a long time after they left, the stillness of the night pressing in around me. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, all of it swirled inside me. But beneath the storm, there was something else, clarity, a sense of purpose. I had taken back control of my life, and though the road ahead would be tough, I knew I could face it. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, healing, rebuilding, and creating a new life for me and the kids. A life free from lies, free from deceit, and free from the crushing weight of betrayal. And as I drove away from that dark, abandoned building, I left behind more than just a broken marriage. I left behind the man who had been consumed by it all. I was ready to start again, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever.